depending on what gang you're in, before you get enough traction and start learning the things and ins and outs, you have to prove yourself from the very beginning.
Sure.
Yeah.
In my case, I had a good reference, which was the gentleman that I had been spoken about earlier, and I was able to get acquainted with the gang without having to do a serious,
Like a crime.
serious crime or initiation from the get-go.
Yeah.
And so, I'm learning, and I get my street name, I get my responsibilities, my roles. And as I start studying into the inner workings of the gang, I find that there's a huge religious connection.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to LD Live. Today we have on the show Johnny with us. He is a former gang member who was 1 month away from taking his oath, which would mean that he could not leave, and if he did, he would get killed. Fortunately, Jesus got a hold of him, and he's with us today to tell his story. Welcome, Johnny.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. It's such a privilege to be able to tell what God has done in my life. And
Awesome.
Everyone has a different story, right?
They do.
And that's one of the coolest things about being a Christian, is that each person we get to meet, they have a different past that allows them to connect with different people, and it just shows the glory of God. So looking forward to sharing how the Lord has led in my life.
It also shows how personal God is. The way he reached you is totally different than how he reached me or these two. It's like every person, he knows exactly what's going to open your eyes to him. I love that.
That's right.
I'm glad you're here as a witness instead of being like under the witness protection program. You probably had a gang name and all that kind of stuff too, right?
Yeah. Yep.
All in the past. Yeah. So you're going to tell us a little bit about kind of how all this started, and that means you're probably going to go back a little bit further.
Yeah.
But it's all stories start from the beginning, right?
That's right.
So how did it start for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm early age, as most of you could tell, right? So I grew up in a generation that had access to technology. I probably received my first independent access to technology probably around the age of 7.
Wow.
With the flip phone.
Whoa,
And,
that's young.
Very young. And I grew up in a household to where my mom and dad were like really good friends, but they weren't marriage. They weren't compatible for marriage. They basically divorced when I was around 2, and my father had some interesting choices in life. I had a drinking habit, and so that kind of led a lot to their divorce and the reasoning behind it. And he, in and out of my adolescent life, was thrown into prison for various things, and so it's kind of an interesting environment to get to, with the get-go, and but my mom was the type of person, and because my dad loved me so much and they were friends, she was like, I still want him to be involved in your life. And so in and out of prison, my father was always around. Ironically, he would live 5 houses up or down the street or around the corner or in the next town by. He was always around when he was out of prison. So it's a very interesting situation. But with my dad out of the picture, that leaves my mom being a single mom, right? And single moms have tons of challenges. And I think they have more challenges today than they have ever faced in the past because of all the technological advancements. I mean, it's crazy. And growing up, having this kind of environment, my father struggled with alcohol as his addiction, but my mom and her struggles was food. And so growing up, I had kind of a pool of influence of substance abuse and a pool of influence from addiction to food. And so you can imagine I grew up eating anytime I wanted, snacking in between meals.
And I met him at Wildwood, it's called Wildwood Health Institute. You were taking the Wildwood Health Evangelism training.
That's
so
right.
you
That's
were
right.
like full on vegan and healthy, and I'm like, you what? No way. That was so funny.
Yeah, I'll share as we go a little bit further how this influenced my life and how big I got. But just thinking from a little age, a lot of parents don't know the influences that their parents have on their children, and really a lot of their influences determine their kids' actions as they grow up.
Early childhood development so important, and you can form so many habits early on that it can affect you the rest of your life.
Yeah, and in this case, you know, as I said, my diet was bad as a child, you know, soda and, you know, just everything that typical kid would eat. And we didn't really have a strong religious structure in the home. I could probably count on the amount of on my fingers the amount of times I went to church. And so there was no strong religious upbringing, no emphasis really on Christ. It was just mainly my mom trying to survive, dealing with the stress of my dad being in and out of prison. And, you know, with all of this in my home, I began seeking attention in school. And so naturally I was the troublemaker in class, starting fights, getting kicked out of school, suspended, and so on. And that started adding to my mom's stress bank. You know what I mean? And as I look back at my issues in school, one of it was seeking attention, but another one is I got independent access to the internet at a very young age. So I mentioned around 6 or 7 I got a flip phone, but by the time I was 9 or 10, I had my own iPod Touch.
Wow.
And you know, at that age, it's not just games that you're playing, it's things that, you know.
So let me ask you a question then to kind of clarify for our audience. Would it be safe to assume that prayer wasn't a big part of your life either?
Yeah, there was no prayer, no Bible study, no church.
So you're not even like praying for meals like you would find in a typical Christian home.
No.
Okay. And then second thing would be like, why do you think you had those devices? Was it like we're trying to keep Johnny happy? Is it like parents trying to buy affection, or just trying to keep you busy or occupied? Or why the devices at the young age, do you think?
That's a good question. If I were to step into my parents' minds, I think it was just because they thought it was something that was good to do. You know?
They didn't see it as a harmful thing. It's like, oh, he likes it. It's fun. It makes him happy.
Yeah, I mean, with no strong religious morality.
So it was a toy.
It was a toy.
Yeah. Growing up, I had my parents, well, my dad mostly, he was pretty materialistic, and he would frequently swap out the TVs, and he just gave them to my brother and I, and we had our own computers, and man, I devoured Nickelodeon and MTV, and I cannot explain to you how much junk I saw growing up, and in secret, because my parents wouldn't know, right? Like, so like you said, it influences you. It really does.
And a gaming addiction that started with a flip phone.
Yeah,
That's right.
Yeah,
Right? It was in the game.
I wasn't a flip
controller.
phone for me. It was, but my brother and I had our own computers, and I was the total tomboy and
Wasn't
just
it the
gaming all the time.
Snake?
The little breakout game or whatever you
Yeah.
started playing.
I don't know which one it was,
Oh,
but I was like Halo, Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto,
Yeah.
like all the time. So
It's one thing I always try to explain to my kids is like, yes, you know, there's all these devices around, and you know, I may have this or I may have that, but whatever we buy, is it a tool or is it a toy?
Yeah.
You know, if it's a toy, then you have to sit there and think about, well, do I really need this? You know, is it really gonna help me? If it's a tool, yes, okay, you know, as long as you're using it for the right purposes.
Yep.
But
Yeah, and you know, just like with anything, with any addiction can start with one small step.
Right.
You know, as I look and reflect on my experience, it was the PlayStation 1, you know, the flip phone, then PlayStation 2, iPod Touch, and then, you know, as time progressed, it was PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and all the, you know, no religious background, all the games that come with it
Sure,
are rated, you know, M for
Whatever,
mature, right?
yeah.
You know, whatever.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it all started one small step. And this opened me to, lack of better terms, a portal of information and things that I never knew existed. And I'm already in school. I'm causing trouble. I'm hanging out with the wrong crowd, getting into fights and all these things. And now I have this independent access to video games and internet. My mind starts being filled with the wrong type of media.
do you think that playing aggressive games sets you up towards becoming a gang member later on?
Absolutely. And it's not only the video games. It had a large play, Grand Theft Auto and these kinds, huge effect on my mind. But the music I was listening to, gangster rap, hip hop, all of that stuff I really enjoyed that. And the movies I like to watch, I had kind of this obsession with movies about gangs. I used to watch documentaries about gangs. All this independent access on the internet about gangs. From a young age, playing these games and listening to this music and all these things, watching these things, I really wanted to become that. It was my dream. When people ask, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? In my heart, I wanted to be a gangster.
Wow.
It makes me think of the tree of knowledge. People think, why would God want to keep anyone from knowledge? But it's the knowledge of good and evil. So when you have access to this and you see all this evil, it's that by beholding you become changed. Bad company corrupts good morals and all these things. You're putting these bad things before your eyes, and we're naturally sinful, fallen creatures, and we get drawn to those things, seduced by those things. So yeah, the internet is almost like this tree of forbidden knowledge.
Was it just? I think of gangs as kind of can be a broad thing. I'm essentially like mafia is like a gang. It's maybe more Italian, or people might consider it to be more, I don't know, high class or whatever. But were you into that kind of stuff too, or was it more like street gang and that's it?
Yeah, I was more into street gangs, and just the obsession with drugs and power, and the kind of the notoriety, the influence that people would have. And as I look back and I see the media that I'm looking at and all the influence it's had on my mind, and then in school hanging out with the wrong crowd, as my middle school years are going and ticking, I'm getting in more and more trouble, getting expelled and all these things. And my father at some point got out of prison, and he found a new addiction. And it was not alcohol. It was substances. He got into drugs. Yeah. And that kind of changed my living scenario quite a bit. Up to now, my mom was more into food and that addiction. That's how she dealt with stress. All of this stuff in school, she's causing her to eat some more and delve into that side. My father in and out for alcohol addiction, but now he's getting out, and now not just him, but my family's into drugs. And
were they back together?
So he lived down the road. Actually, that's a good question. When he gets out of prison, most times we would house him until he got onto his own feet. Interesting. And so I believe, looking back, it was at that intermediate stage where he's still with us until he gets on his own feet. And this is where drugs get introduced into the family. Wow. And when you look at it from my mom's standpoint, right, she is so stressed. Her son is running havoc in school. She's one, a single parent predominantly. His father just got out of prison. There's a lot of things going on. What can I do to lessen my stress? I'm not going to drink because my ex-husband does that, and I don't like that. So what can I have, And so my family digs into that. And after a while, as you can imagine, with the people I'm hanging out with and all the media I've been consuming, the natural thing is for me to get into drugs myself.
Yeah. What age?
I started consuming at first at the age of 13. Yeah. And so independent access around 9 or 10 of the, of internet. And then just a few years later, the step at 13, deciding to do that.
Did you try to start proving yourself kind of early on in your friend group, like doing extreme things, or trying to prove how tough you are or something like that, kind of your own volition because you were into that lifestyle and wanted to be that person?
That's a good question. I was always kind of it was more natural for me to do troublemaking, and in my circles I was more of a leader, and except for in the case that I was in the older crowds, then I did look up to them and their behavior. Their influence had quite a bit on me. But for the most part, I was really, my mindset was being independent about what I wanted. So it was interesting, but that was in the school environment. Fast forwarding just a little bit, my drug addiction continues. Like, I'm about 15 now, and things are getting so bad in my household. In the beginning, it was a secret, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you can't hold that secret too long. So
Yeah.
now my whole family is supportive of my addiction. My father goes
What?
back to prison, and it becomes not just a little thing here and there. My mom and me are just we're stuck.
Like you guys were taking drugs together.
That's right.
At 15.
Between 14 and 15. And so you can imagine how deep the hole gets. And I dropped out of high school, and I said, hey, I'm just going to do my own thing. And that's when I started running into people that I started wanting to prove myself to.
Okay.
And so, when you get into the realm of drugs, I'm sure most of you know here, it's you meet people that you never otherwise would have met. And
Sure.
I got linked up with a gentleman that was almost the age of my father, and we started doing hard substances together.
Like cocaine.
Meth and so on, and when you start small, it just grows and grows and grows, and and if you're about that, if that's what you want, you're gonna find it.
Yeah.
And so I got linked up with this guy, and I found out that he was in a gang, and this gang is not just a little high school clique or something that only exists in one little small town. This was a nationwide gang. And that attracted me more than anything in the past. Because this is my dream. This is what I really wanted to be in life. And the opportunity is here. And I started stepping out to prove myself.
Okay.
I hear a lot of, secret societies, gangs, all that stuff. The appeal to it is the family, the brotherhood. I got your back. Would you associate your broken home to another draw to that besides just it looks tough or whatever? Because I hear a lot, divorce is crazy, broken homes, all that. Is that going to be something that causes more people to go towards gangs and things like that?
That's a good question. I think in many cases it does. Because a lot of people that are in gangs get into it because their family is so broken that they need to help them. Whether it means selling drugs to bring in money, or whether, there's just a lot of reasons. In my case, even though we had some rocks in my boat, in the family boat, my parents were still very loving, caring, supportive, hardworking. And so, I would say in general, I didn't grow up in a home like most others that would join a gang.
Yeah.
And, but there was one thing about this gang that many people don't know, and other gangs that people don't know, that actually drew me in to want to go all the way.
Okay.
And that was religion.
Religion.
They were Christian?
So in the beginning, when I started rubbing shoulders with them, I came in an interesting time, in an interesting way, because depending on what gang you're in, before you get enough traction and start learning the things and ins and outs, you have to prove yourself from the very beginning.
Sure.
Yeah.
In my case, I had a good reference, which was the gentleman that I had been spoken about earlier, and I was able to get acquainted with the gang without having to do a serious,
Like a crime.
serious crime or initiation from the get-go.
Yeah.
And so, I'm learning, and I get my street name, I get my responsibilities, my roles. And as I start studying into the inner workings of the gang, I find that there's a huge religious connection. And this gang was following a religion called Kingism. Kingism. The whole concept that Jesus Christ was born as a king, and therefore only Latin kings can go to heaven.
Wait, Latin? Like, what?
Really?
Yeah.
But
So-
Jesus wasn't
I gotta look
Latin.
this up.
He was Middle Eastern.
Yeah, and there's a lot to it that we can't dig in, that we won't dig into here, because just a lot of details. But Jesus was born a king, and the followers of him are kings, and being a king is your ticket to heaven. And each king you meet will have a little bit of a different take on that. There's a lot of different information, but that's what I was told.
Was this your first introduction to Christianity?
It wasn't my first. Like I said in the beginning, I probably went to church amount, the amount of times I could count on my hand. So I had some concept that God was real, but I didn't know anything about God. I did know that I knew God was real and that Jesus died for my sins. And so when I got into this, that was the real, like, wow, this is interesting.
So this is fascinating. So I just looked this up. So for you guys and the people watching, this is a fascinating kind of recap, if you will. This is from Oxford Reference. This kingism is a spiritual practice of the street organization, the almighty Latin king and queen nation. So they abbreviate that ALKQN. It refers to a moral and political way of life that argues that America is a deeply racist society and that the so-called Latino leaders have been planted by the dominant society to cause subterfuge. In response, ALKQN have emerged as the true ambassadors and socio-cultural resistance to the subjugation of colonial social control.
Wow.
Kingism provides members of ALKQN with an alternative consciousness, they have that in parentheses, a positive forward way of looking at life in the face of, and then it continues, and I guess it's cut off. I'd have to sign up for this thing to get the
Wow, I've never heard
deal,
of this.
but that's basically what it
Very
is.
Interesting.
Yeah, and each person is different. They have different reasons why they're in gangs or even in this particular gang. But as I started studying, as I started getting involved, that was for me the biggest thing. And so we had our own prayers. We had our own church meetings.
They read from the Bible?
They had something that they would refer to as their Bible, so to speak. It was their way, their code of living, and they would call God Yahweh. And we had prayers for our brothers and fallen sisters, and it's very interesting.
Like prayers for the dead?
Prayers for the dead, prayer for the living. So it's a very, very interesting experience. And I started seeing myself, I started getting interested in God. I knew God existed, never thought about serving him. But man, if Jesus is a gangster, I'm all in.
Wow.
So where are you from?
I'm from Texas. And
Okay.
this gang is nationwide.
Right.
Strongest population would probably be Chicago,
Yeah.
New York here in the
That's what it was
U.S.
saying here.
And they have chapters all throughout the U.S. and so on. And now they don't only receive Latinos. You might ask, well, how are you in if you're a white guy? But they're not so strong about that anymore.
But you are not a Latino, so you could not be saved?
No, I could join as a white person. But the whole concept is that if you are a follower of this religion, you'll be saved.
You have to buy in.
Yeah.
It makes me think of Mormonism, kind of like if you want to make it to heaven, you got to become a Mormon, you got to marry a Mormon or something like that.
Yes. And so, this started doing things in my mind to where I started seeing myself on a mission for God to take out all my other rival gang members in his name. For me, rivals wasn't about just colors, wasn't just about territory, it was about religion. And depending on how deep you get, your allies and you, a lot of them believe that they're worshiping God. We believe we're worshiping God. And our rivals, we saw them as Satan worshipers.
Wow.
And so it gets deep when they're saying that there's a lot of destruction or killing done in the name of God, even in the gangland.
That's like a gang crusade.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, that in current day crusaders.
Yeah. And, I will repeat this again because it's important for our viewers to know not every person that's in is in for this. A lot of kings could care less about any of the religion. They're just in for the whatever reason.
But this shows where your heart was.
That's
you were
right.
seeking for God.
That's right.
And you just got deceived by this thing, but you still had a desire to know him.
That's right. And that's what makes it so important. Childhood influences, I started off kind of with the bad, right? But the fact that my mom and dad took me to church maybe 5 times growing up, that gave me enough seed at this time to be interested in serving him. So, some parents may be watching this and be like, man, I have made so many mistakes. I mean, my kids are just way off the path. But I'm telling you, God can use the little seeds that you sow as a parent. Yeah. And if you didn't have any religious influence on your children at all, God can still use you today, Yeah. And so this was my draw. I started getting in, and I was still selling drugs and so on, but a thought came to me one day. because before I got into all this, my father got sent back to prison, and he started writing me letters about Jesus. Apparently, he had found Christ when he was in prison this time.
Wow.
But I never wrote him back. I never paid attention. But it was in this moment I felt an impression. Hey, why don't you reach out to your dad and let him know how much of a follower of God you are? Right? And so I start writing letters to my dad, and as a gang member, and Special Latin Kings, they hold to a code of secrecy. So very, very, if you open up, it's, there's serious consequences for that. And when you're writing between an inmate, you can't mention anything that has to do with gang paraphernalia, and that will just, because they'll cut your letters off. So I had to write it to him in code and so on and so on. But he found out what gang I was in because he was locked up with some of the, people in this gang. And he started teaching me about deception. Some people may say, well, man, why does Little Light Studios focus so much on all the bad things?
Yeah, we get that a lot.
But let me tell you something. My dad started with deception because he knew that's where I was at. He knew I was being deceived. And if it were me, I would have probably started somewhere else. But my dad had wisdom from God to teach me about deception. So he started teaching me things about Freemasonry, secret societies. And then all of the things he started teaching me, little by little, my eyes started being open about the gang. Wow, I have Freemasons in the gang. Oh, wow, they do this and they do that. And this, even though we seem like we're moral, all this other stuff is immoral. And, step by step, God started using my dad's letters, teaching me basic things about truth to open my eyes.
Wow.
And he gave me a Bible tract. Some people may be against giving out Bible tracts, but let me tell you, my dad gave me a Bible tract that he sent in a letter almost 2 years before. I opened it. How to Give Your Life to Jesus was the tract.
He sent it to you 2 years prior before you opened it.
That's right.
Wait, so you did get it, but it was just sitting there for 2 years.
Just sitting, like all the other letters. I didn't read them, didn't touch them, didn't write them back. In there, he said, do you still have it? I said, I think so. I looked. There it was. I confessed my sins, gave my life to Jesus because I was genuinely interested in God.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I said, through a course of time, I said, Jesus, if this is your way, I'm going to stay in. I'm going to ride all the way. But if it's not, get me out before it's too late.
So where does this part come in where you were going to take an oath?
So my dad is teaching me back and forth. I start praying this prayer. I give my life to Christ. And I said, Lord, if this is your way, I'm going to stay in. If not, get me out before it's too late. After about a week or two of praying that prayer, I'm in my backyard. And the biggest question for me to God, am I being deceived? Is this the truth? I'm in my backyard, and I had this very strong impression. The nation is deceiving you. Almighty Latin King. We are Almighty Latin King nation, not King and Queen nation because of the chapter. But the nation is deceiving me. I called up my friend, and I had to make the choice. Do I leave the gang and suffer consequences? Or do I just be a follower of man and fear man rather than God? I had a clear calling from God. I had the proof. My eyes were being opened step by step, and here I had the strong impression. I remember that I hadn't received my oath, but I still didn't know what kind of consequences I'd get. So I was afraid that they would hurt me, my mom. But I decided to follow the voice and the conviction of the Holy Spirit. I made a phone call and gave them some reasons why I wanted to leave. In the beginning, the reasons weren't very strong. So they come back to my house about 2 weeks later, knock on my front door. Hey, why do you want to leave? And, at first I was giving some lame excuse, but then I just finally told him, I said, you know what? I've been studying, and God has told me that you are deceiving me, and that this is not the truth. And I said, I don't want to be a part of it. It's not truth. And this individual, in fact, it was the individual that had groomed me into the gang, he was so deceived that he told me that was from Satan.
Wow.
Imagine, really deceived, And by the power of God, I was able to escape. And he told me right then and there, he said, you are 1 month away from receiving your oath. You were going to be in for life. This is what you were going to receive, all this power, all this and this. You were 1 month away and you want to leave because of this?
Yeah.
Imagine if I didn't listen to the voice of God.
Yeah. I'm sure that was a convincing argument he had. He's like, you're so close, and the devil's trying to keep you from getting into the kingdom, you know?
Yeah, you can gain the whole world but lose your soul.
That's right.
The devil always dangles the carrot first.
Yeah.
That's right. And so, for the viewers that are watching, if the Lord is convicting you about something, you got to hop on it.
Yep.
Do all that you can to follow it, because you don't know. You don't know. Who knows how harder it would have been if I was closer,
Oh, yeah.
and having this tendency to prove myself to that crowd, particularly, I don't know what would happen. So, fast forward, I come out, I wipe my hands clean, and now is a new journey with Christ. I put away all the drugs except for marijuana, because I'm like, well, hey, God created it, right? And so, my addiction to marijuana was still running rampant. But my dad started teaching me. And, the Lord, he uses anything. He started teaching me through these letters. And my dad gave me this little pocket book. It had like 30 verses in it, and called Verses of Assurance, Comfort, and Salvation. And I would study that every night and memorize every verse. And that was kind of my Bible, right? I didn't have anything else. That's how I started. And then my dad started, I got linked up and got a Bible. And when I got the Bible and started studying, I was convicted about marijuana. 3 or so years of addiction. I remember looking at my bong one night, and I'm like, man, that bong water is so disgusting.
What is that? I've never taken drugs, so I wouldn't know.
It's a pipe, and it's sucking through the water. So the water is like a filter, and the water just gets brown and nasty and gross.
Oh.
Yeah. And so I'm like looking at the bong water and the residue, and I'm like, man, this is so nasty. Is this something that God would really approve of?
Yeah.
And I was convicted. Throw it away in the trash. That night, God gave me the power to throw it away in the trash. Never to touch drugs since in 8 years.
Praise the Lord.
And so, God gave the power. And, I start reading the Bible, and I get linked up with this Bible study set that my dad recommended me called Amazing Facts. Have you guys done Amazing Facts?
yeah.
Oh, man.
Heard of it?
Powerful Bible studies. I mean, straight to the point, and a quick answer and question format. Amazing. And this Bible study set started opening my eyes to truths that I've never heard of before. I mean, it just lit me on fire.
That's awesome. Dougie B.
Yeah,
Doug Batchelor.
If there's any viewer that's watching that haven't done Amazing Facts, check them out. I mean, they changed my life. I was reading them. I would do about 2 a night, and there was about 27, depending on how deep you want to get. I started doing all these studies, and I read this book, and this book taught about a particular prophecy in the Bible found in the book of Revelation. And it started talking about some things that I'd never heard about before. And my dad sent it to me, and I got so piqued and started studying into these prophecies. I was like, man, I have to find a church that's teaching and believing these things. And so I found a church nearby, about 30 minutes from my house. And I told my mom, I said, Mom, we're going to go to church. And you can imagine, my mom just watched me give up all the drugs. Which, in fact, I remember one time, the last time we did drugs together, I had a very bad trip. And it's because I did it after I was a Christian. This wasn't marijuana, but it was a hard drug. And I had a bad trip. It was a spiritual bad trip and very demonic. And I told my mom that this is from the devil. And from that day, she had let go of the drugs as well.
Wow.
And so God, she wasn't even a Christian, but he used that. So I said, let's go to church. And my mom starts driving me to church, right?
Wow.
We start going to church, and at this time, I'm studying. I get baptized about, 8 months after I start going to the church. And my mom starts seeing something happen in my life. After I was baptized, all these things have changed. Stop hanging out with my friends. I'm studying the Bible all the time. She catches me praying early in the morning and late at night. And she just started noticing all these changes. But there's one thing that convinced her more than anything else. And it's going to be something that you wouldn't expect. I started losing weight.
Wow.
After I was baptized, I found a powerful message from God in the Bible about health.
That's amazing.
I mean,
is it Daniel?
Yeah, I was in Leviticus first and learned about clean and unclean meats. Yeah. I'm like, man, this is powerful. I'm like, God's got a health plan. So I started following clean meats. I said, God, I'm not content being here. I was 230 pounds, by the way. All that food addiction had grown up, and I was 230 pounds. And I said, and I used to take comfort, Lord, I called myself fat. I said, I'm fat, but you love me. And he said, yeah, I love you, son. And I took comfort in that. But after a while, he told, it's like I got the impression one day, I love you so much, I don't want to keep you where you're at.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And that convicted me to study. And so I read Leviticus, changed my diet. After about a month or two, I'm like, Lord, this is not enough. I want something better. I go to the book of Daniel and read how his diet, eating that plant-based diet, changed his mind and impacted his relationship with God and being able to receive wisdom and all these things. And I'm like, Lord, if my diet impacts my ability to comprehend your word and to understand your voice in prayer, I want to go to the next level.
Amen.
So
how old are you at this point?
I'm about 15, 16. So a lot happened in those, 13, started drugs, found, was in the gang at the age of 15 and left at the age of 15. I was in about half a year. And then, I'm getting baptized. And so, a lot of things happening at once.
Did you go back to school?
That's a good question. So after this conviction about health, I'm vegetarian for about 3 months. And then I study the book of Genesis, and I'm like, hey, I want to follow the original diet that God has. And I started following a fully plant-based diet and lose about 90 pounds, okay?
Wow.
So lose about 90 pounds, and that's what convicts my mom that there's power in the message of this church.
Wow.
She starts coming to the church as a member, as a visitor, starts doing Bible studies. She's baptized. Now that we're a baptized family, the call goes, the idea comes to mind, why don't you go to school? And after I was baptized, I would like to share with you that God put it upon my heart immediately to start doing evangelism in my former gang territory and my former rival gang territory.
Whoa.
So I would go every night and pass out some of these books that I read and Bible studies that I read. And I'll have to tell you a story, but it's interesting. I remember one night, okay, so very quickly, I was BC life. I'm guarding the house of a gang member. And a rival gang member drives up. We have a confrontation. He starts circling around the block. You know what happens when people are circling around the block? They're preparing for a drive-by shooting. Check my waistband. No pistol, nothing to defend myself but a knife. Call my buddies. No one's there to back me up. They're only one block down the road, and this guy's circling around once, twice, and there's a pause. Picks up someone else for the second time. Picks up someone else on that second lap, and then nothing happens. Fast forward, I'm doing evangelism in the gas station. Him and I meet face to face in his territory.
Wow.
He says, you remember that day you're acting funny? I said, yeah. He said, I was fully convinced to take your life that day, but when I picked up my friend on that second round, he convinced me not to.
Wow.
That's the reason why you're here today.
Wow.
Shared the gospel with him, and he wanted to give his life to Christ.
What?
And he did?
And, I never followed up with him from there. I don't know his case, but, God can use us.
Yeah.
And so all this has happened. My mom gets baptized, right? Now it's time to go back to school. I go back to school, and I'm like 14, almost 15 credits behind, and I'm supposed to start as a senior. So I'm basically a year and a half or more behind.
Yeah.
But my main objective was, Lord, you have me doing ministry out here at the gas station. My previous gang members, instead of hating me, started respecting me.
Wow.
The former gang rivals that I had started respecting me, started appreciating what I was doing for Christ. And now I said, Lord, I want to go on a mission to where people saw me at my worst, high school, and I want to give Bible studies. And the Lord opened the door. We're in high school. I have about 4 or 5 Bible study students, and one of them went all the way through, was baptized, and is my wife today. So praise God.
That's so
You
cool.
went back to high school and found your wife.
That's right.
That's amazing.
That's
And
right.
so that you finished up?
Yeah, so by God's
Awesome.
grace, he allowed me to graduate that year and right then, I got right at the day after graduation, got plugged into full-time ministry.
So you were out of school for a couple of years.
That's right.
And went back as a senior and graduated on time. Like,
that's right.
I mean, that health message worked, right?
Yeah.
This says that Daniel is 10 times wiser. You know?
That's right. God was merciful.
So eventually,
Awesome.
you came to Wildwood. You took the health evangelism course and then the ministry management course. Graduated from that with your wife. So she took lifestyle coaching, right?
Yes, that's
Which is
right.
all, health evangelism is basically teaching people about health, showing that you care, just like Jesus showed people that he cared by healing them, and then like having it as an opening wedge to talk about Jesus. So you guys both graduated from Wildwood Center for Health Evangelism, and now where are you working now?
So yeah, Wildwood was a powerful experience for us, and right after we graduated, we got plugged in with the ministry called Streams of Light International. And Streams of Light International, basically they're passionate about evangelism, passionate about getting church members involved and sharing literature, just like I was when I was at those gas stations,
And what your dad was sending you from
Exactly.
jail.
That's
Literature
right.
works. Literature worked for me too. When I started, God just kind of gave me an eye-opening revelation in December 2011. I was just like, whoa, like we're in the end. And I just started picking up anything I could find. And I started finding stuff. I was like, well, I've never heard this before. So big, I believe in literature evangelism for sure.
Yeah, and I think the greatest literature evangelist that ever lived is God himself. If he wasn't in the business of literature evangelism, none of us would be here today.
right.
We wouldn't have the Bible.
Yeah.
And so that's my drive, and my passion, and our passion as a ministry. We train churches to get involved in sharing literature, and we do that all throughout North America. And we have a particular book that we share. It's called The Great Controversy. Powerful book. Have you guys heard of that book? Okay. So Great Controversy, and it comes with a health magazine, but this book has answers to life's biggest questions.
Yeah.
It talks about the deceptions of Satan. It talks about what happens when we die. It talks about the prophecies of the past, present, and the future. And above all, it gives hope to people who are looking for a solid rock in the midst of the great controversy of their own lives. And that's Jesus.
Yeah.
And so that's what we do. Travel full time, do mission trips, train churches, and work with churches at large to just share hope in their community.
Wow.
Awesome.
It's amazing to see how far you've come. Like, Christ can use anyone. And the fact that Jesus used your dad in prison to reach out to you, to then reach out to his wife he was divorced from, and his son, that is so powerful.
So where's your dad at today?
My dad is out of prison. He actually got out of prison the year that I converted.
Oh, okay.
And him and my mom are on a journey. He lives about 5 houses down still. And they're both on a journey and following God. And they
That's
have
awesome.
experienced the transformation of Christ in their own lives. And all the past, if parents are here and they're like, I did bad in the past, and now I'm a new person. Know that that your influence through God's transformation is the highest thing that can be done for an example to your children.
Any hope of reconciliation between the two of them?
In marriage, no.
I don't know if your mom's remarried or anything.
My father's remarried, yeah,
Okay.
but still strong friends,
That's amazing, man.
Yeah.
Wow.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, praise the Lord for the work he's done in you, and thank you so much for coming by and sharing your story. And I really hope that people at home will be inspired.
Amen. Amen.
awesome.
Thank you guys.
Yeah.
Very powerful.
Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have a similar story or just want to share your testimony, drop it down below in the comments. Make sure you hit like and subscribe. It always helps us out, and you can see anytime we upload new content. If you want a t-shirt, we've got t-shirts. You go to lightwear.shop. We're not wearing them today.
I'm wearing one.
Oh, you are wearing one.
Yeah.
Keith is. So if you like that t-shirt or any one, another one, we've got so many. Lightwear.shop. If you want to donate, you can do so by going to patreon.com/littlelightstudios. You'll get lots of cool perks, or you can go to ls.tv/give. You can help us out there as well. And other than that, we'll see you guys in the next episode.
you're looking for good, wholesome, educational content for your children, subscribe to our new channel, Little Light Kids.
There has been very few movies in the history of the world that have completely changed our world. And in 1999, a movie titled The Matrix hit the world stage.
These stories are often told and seen over and over again. Is it simply just to make money? Or is there something more nefarious behind it?